It's time for the Unnamed SWTOR podcast, a podcast so good it doesn't need a name. So without any further ado, here's your host, JD. Take it away, Johnny.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 17 of the Unnamed SWTOR podcast. I'm your host, JD, aka Gaddick Teagan, and in today's episode, there's really not a ton to talk about as far as SWTOR news goes. That's right, SWTOR news was pretty non-existent this week. There was some lore gear shenanigans, which is actually good for players, so I can't really fault BioWare for that. They're doing some good stuff there. You can now dye your lore gear. You can now dye your lore gear, which is nice. But other than that, that's not going to make a whole episode. Patch 2.4 is coming out next week, so that probably explains some of why there isn't a ton of news to discuss this week. We already know pretty much what's coming out of patch 2.4. So patch 2.4 will be the focus of next week's episode. If you're listening to this after Tuesday, or Wednesday, or Thursday, or whenever the patch eventually comes out, because, you know, with the large patch in BioWare, you kind of expect it to take some time to actually come out. But hopefully it comes out Tuesday. You're listening to this on maybe Thursday, Friday, and you have your first impressions that you want to get out there. Feel free to email me at gaddickteagan@crr.com. I'll read them out on the show. We'll talk about my opinions of patch 2.4 after having seen it for a week or so, but that doesn't really help me right now. So what am I going to talk about this week? Well, I, in my boredom, decided it would be a good idea to go to the SWTOR forums. Because that's a good idea, right? Yeah. Well, the good news is, and maybe the bad news, I found the forum thread, which has become kind of infamous and very controversial, an open letter to BioWare improving overall state of SWTOR. Well, this is a very hot button topic this week. Brings up a lot of good points, but it also has a lot of downside to it. You know, there's a lot of vitriol surrounding how it was put out there. There's a lot of different opinions on this, and you may be saying to yourself, why am I even giving this guy the time of day? Because I do think he brings up some fair points. I have nothing better to talk about this week, and he has a lot of stuff to say, so let's discuss what is mentioned. There's a bullet-pointed list. I think he comes up with 13. I have 10 topics written down, and I'm going to go into my opinions on the 10 topics and react to his opinions. So, with all that being said, let's force leap right in.
Red 2, I've got a topic coming in hot, requesting clearance to engage.
Lock S-foils and attack positions. You are cleared to discuss.
I'm going to assume that you aren't a regular forum goer, maybe haven't caught this thread, so I'm going to go ahead and read it for you. We'll have a little story time. I'll stop at points when I want to discuss what I have to discuss, and we'll see where this takes us. Hopefully it takes up a whole episode, because that would suck if this is a short one, because there isn't much to talk about. But the poster is Friend Referral, formerly Mr. Jurgens. I don't know why he changed his name, or what the deal is with his name being Friend Referral, but he says, Dear BioWare Austin, the signers of this petition of Star Wars The Old Republic community are imploring you for an improvement in the overall state of the game. Before I begin and elaborate, by no means do we mean any disrespect to BioWare Austin with this petition. In the rules of conduct, it is stated that petitions of any form are not allowed, but with the introduction of the new community manager, Eric Musco, in the forums, he made it clear that the forum moderation for the most part was going to be more lenient, and because of that, I feel comfortable with presenting a formal written request to implement certain changes that will make for a healthier, happier, and growing player base. We would like to see these changes made within a year of this date. This should be very fair and lenient time frame, but we hope you can execute these changes as soon as possible. Please no soon TM. We understand that you possibly lack the manpower to make these changes ASAP, but as long as you can acknowledge this petition and can give us some meaningful and elaborate updates, then I think the supporters of this petition will be content. Well, first let's get some background here. Initially, this was a much more controversial thread in which there were guilds signing up, threatening to unsubscribe by October 1st if these demands were not met. It was essentially a ransom note for some players' subscriptions, which is not the best way to do things. There are certain ways that you can get your points across that don't involve threats or, any kind of ransom notes, or you don't have to hold anyone hostage to get your point across. That's kind of what the first thread was. I'm very glad that they decided to change the thread in its tone. This one is a little bit better. I think anytime you put a time frame on any form of digital media, though, you're probably setting yourself up for failure. Things in MMOs especially just take long periods of time, longer than you can think. And some of these changes would take far more than a year to fix, I believe. So putting a date on that is kind of ridiculous. And a lot of these things, as you'll see, have been discussed by the community team before, and by Bioware specifically. By Bioware before, and the community team specifically. So it's kind of difficult to figure out what the point is, but let's go through the points, because they do make some good ones. Point 1. Ranked War Zones. Removing PvP content is not the answer. The PvP community was told in a previous Summer of SWTOR update that Ranked would receive recognition. There was not much of it, but a little tidbit of Ranked recognition was something the PvP community desperately needed. Unfortunately, approximately 2 months later, you announce this update that you'd be pulling the plug on Ranked Warzone 8v8s. You guys never comprehended why Ranked Warzones failed at all. Season 1 never began, nor was it ever even hinted at of approximate release. Nor was it ever even hinted of an approximate release. I don't know if that's right, but whatever. We never got matchmaking, which was... I'm sorry that this is a little... It's not the best written piece in the world. We never got matchmaking, which was said that it would be implemented when Season 1 would begin, and that's a system that was crucial for this PvP system to expand and improve. Outside that Summer of SWTOR update, there was really no interaction with the community on the development of Ranked Warzones. Anything as related to Ranked Warzones was always brushed off and avoided, and it wasn't what the PvP community needed, nor was it appropriate at all. Additionally, you announced the removal of Ranked Warzones a bit after you implemented server transfers. Your PvP customers spent a lot of money transferring their characters to servers where the competitive PvP was more prevalent and healthy. And once they heard this, there were a lot of players that left the game, and guilds disbanded indefinitely or for good. At this moment, there is a petition to stop the removal of Ranked Warzones. This system has loads of potential and is still able to work. Concerning PvP patches, maybe one PvP patch can solely focus on the system of AV8 Warzones, while the next PvP patch can focus solely on arena systems. Ranked Warzones shouldn't be removed. Let us have more content. As said previously, many players and guilds have unsubscribed and quit, but if there were PvP patches that solely focused on the 8-man system, then PvP overall in SWTOR could definitely be improved. Our first request is that we implore you to read that petition, respond to it, and hopefully have a change of heart of Ranked Warzones. I'm gonna be frank here, I don't agree with this. Well, I do agree with it, sort of. I think that Bioware does have data that suggests that Ranked Warzones just weren't working. I believe it was at the Seattle Cantina, or maybe the San Francisco Cantina, San Diego Cantina. I believe it was said that the average Ranked Warzone queue was like 2 hours. That's not a working system, not a healthy system, and not one that Bioware should spend time supporting. They decided a long time ago, in my opinion, that AV8 wasn't where they should head for this game for Ranked. It just didn't work. Not enough players did it. So they decided that players want 4v4. There was demand for 4v4 arenas for a while. They started development on it, and that's what we're getting in the next patch, is the 4v4 Ranked. Now, in order to do that, they need to take out the 8v8... They don't need to take out the 8v8 Ranked, but there's no reason to leave a system in there that they're not going to support. If no one's going to do it, then why even tease players having it in the game? It's just like they had to rip the Band-Aid off and get players into 4v4. Now, what I could see, and what they've talked about in the Guild Summit, I believe it was, many years ago, I say that like this game's 10 years old, At the Guild Summit, right after the game launched, I believe they talked about guild rivalries and being able to set up pre-made AV8 matches between two guilds. That's a system that I could see them adding, and I think would be a nice addition to the game. And it's something they wouldn't have to support that much. You wouldn't have to put in any con rewards or anything for it. And I think that's one of the reasons why they had to take the AV8 down. How could you legitimize giving rewards for something that the only real people that would be playing it are either the few and far between groups that are looking to actually get a good match, or the players that are just using it to exploit for quick comms and things like that. So I could see them doing an 8v8 grudge match style where you can set up 8v8s against other guilds or other set groups. That would be cool, and I don't think they'd have to add rewards for it. It would just require a new type of matchmaking, which is the only thing they have to work on. Not the easiest thing in the world, obviously, but I think it's something they can do. So for this, I like the idea of having pre-made 8v8 war zones, but I don't think they should be ranked 8v8s. And I think 8v8s are legitimately being taken out of the game. It's not a slap in the face. I feel bad for the players that transferred looking for a better 8v8 community, but with this new system of 4v4, I think a lot of those players would be satisfied with that too. I think saying that every one of these 8v8 players stopped playing because they were removing 8v8s and replacing them with 4v4s is a little bit of a red herring. I think a lot of players want a PvP to PvP, and I think a lot of them will be satisfied with 4v4s, they'll be happy to play those. Although I do think it is a rather bold move, it's a risky, high-risk, high-reward move, as I've talked about previously, that the removal of 8v8 is interesting from a development standpoint because players that are currently playing PvP are playing for the 8v8 style. We'll see if players do latch onto the 4v4 style, but I have a feeling that they will. I think the feedback from the PTS has been very positive. I think players like this style of arena combat, and we'll see where it goes. You know, maybe in a year they'll re-add ranked war zones. They haven't ruled that out, but I think adding the preset 8v8s would be a cool thing to do. Moving right along into point number 2, PvE operations and bosses. Our second request is that we implore you to adjust the difficulty of operations and its individual bosses. With a lot of new content, guilds will return to SWTOR, complete the op a few times, and leave due to boredom. There are minimal changes between each of the difficulty levels of each operation. Furthermore, some bosses have a difficulty so incredibly easy or hard that it makes the operation no longer fun. The following are changes that we wish to see. Regarding difficulty, adjust the difficulty levels for each operation. Story mode should be able to be completed with a proper gear of any level, hard mode should be significantly harder, not just a tiny bit, and you should not be able to complete hard mode until you have at least 50% of whatever tier gear that is dropped in hard mode, which is probably the stupidest sentence I've ever read, but I'll talk about that in a second. Nightmare mode should be significantly harder than hard mode, and should be near impossible to complete without almost full top tier gear. This will make things more challenging for those who enjoy PvE, and they will clear and get tired of the content really quickly. I don't know what he means by that, but moving along. Regarding individual boss fights, some boss fights are way harder than others. For example, there are those who at the release of TFB Nightmare that were able to defeat everyone but Dreadguards. It is our opinion, I don't know who is our, I'm going to replace our with my. It is my opinion that the difficulty of bosses should be around the same as others, with a slight upward scale of difficulty until you reach the final boss, which should be the hardest. We know there are some bosses that are considered a DPS check of a sort, but in the aforementioned example, the hardest boss was the second boss. The first boss should be the DPS check for an operation, not some boss in the middle. I've got to say this one is probably the one I disagree with the most. Well, maybe not the most, but I disagree with this one a lot. I agree that hard modes do need to be harder, because with the exception of Styrac, the current tier of hard modes were pretty easy. I think we full cleared almost everything the first time we went in there. First lockout week we went in there with my guild. We cleared everything but Styrac. Styrac took a little while, but it was just not difficult enough. So hard modes do could use a bump up. I also agree nightmares could be harder as well. The current tier of nightmares are kind of easy, I gotta say. Dread Guards are a pretty good fight. Writhing Heart is a joke. The Tron boss is pretty much a joke other than being a gear check. If you have the right gear, I think Kephis is almost easier than it is in hard mode. And the Terror from Beyond is pretty difficult. It's a pretty good fight. So Dread Guards and Terror from Beyond are the good ones in there. In the other one, Styrak is hard. The Council fight, pretty difficult. Thrasher is annoying, but not too hard. Olak is interesting, but not hard. The Operations Chief is a joke. Dosh Road, wouldn't call him a joke, but he's not that hard. And Titan 6, also not difficult. So you have like 4 of the 12 bosses right now are not bosses I would consider nightmare quality. I think they need to bump up the difficulty in total, and I agree that they should have more of a stepping stone. Each boss is harder than the last. I disagree with the first boss always needs to be the DPS check. I think that switching up where the DPS check is or where certain bosses is interesting. I think they could have a fight where the puzzle boss is the first one. I think that really mixes things up and leads to some cool stuff. So I definitely would like them to mix things up and make things harder. What I disagree with is this ridiculous claim that you should have at least 50% of the hard mode gear for you to be able to do the next hard mode thing. And this whole section puts way too much stock in gear. I think that you should be required to have some level of gear. But first of all, to say that you should have 50% of the hard mode gear in order to do hard mode is just ridiculous. But what I hope he means is the hard mode from the last tier. It doesn't say that at all, I just reread it, and I hope that's what he means, but a gear requirement is part of an MMO, but I think a skill requirement should be far more. It should be skill plus gear equals boss kill. It should not just be certain level of gear equals boss kill, and it shouldn't just be certain level of skill equals boss kill. I think skill should have a greater weight than gear level, so let's make an equation here. Let's say 2 skill plus gear equals kill. That's my equation for what I would like to see in my boss fights. If you're really good, I think your skill should outweigh your lack of gear, but I also think that gear should be part of the equation. I know I've droned on about this over and over and over, but I feel like I just need to keep saying it. I think the progression system that they've set up is really important to keep intact, and I do think you should have to do scum and villainy hard modes before you go into the next level of hard modes. And that way they could also bump up the difficulty in progressive hard modes. The hard modes that you have in the second tier could be even harder than the hard modes in the tier before it. And I think that's an interesting way to just show progression. And that could also train people who aren't necessarily Nightmare Raiders to maybe do the Nightmare modes. So I think story modes will make like a house here. So at the bottom level you have story modes. Everyone should be able to do story modes. And then you have a stepping stone, the stairs of your hard modes that get a little harder, a little harder, a little harder. And at the top you have your Nightmare modes. And I think all Nightmare modes should be the same really, rock hard difficulty. And I think the story mode should be the same, intro to rating, step into anyone, see all the content, and then your hard mode should bridge that gap, and they should get a little harder each time, and you shouldn't be able to jump over steps. You should have to go each step into Nightmare mode. Now, if you're really good, yeah, you can just go right into Nightmare mode, and I think that should be kept intact also, but for the average person, they're going to take the stairs, not the ladder. So I think that's the way that PvE should be kept, and I really hope and I look forward to seeing what they do with that, because I think they're on pace to do that, and I hope they do. Point number 3, PvP rewards and missions. This petition about PvP rewards has received a good amount of support, and our third request is that we implore you to read that petition and respond to it, and hopefully implement improved rewards features, such as something like this, he links. It's ridiculous how PvP returns very measly rewards, and the only 2 lobby PvP and 3 endgame PvP missions to work with. Many of us feel like you're trying to force us to enter a playstyle that we loathe with a very fiery passion, e.g. dailies, flashpoints, etc., And as for crafting, it costs us credits to advance, which can be detrimental to the little we already earn. Some players have brought up the issue of the Chinese credit sailors. Sailors? They're sailing into SWTOR. Chinese credit sellers trying to exploit the rewards if they were buffed. But with a vote to kicks option in place and the automatic boot for 1 minute of inactivity at the spawn area, it makes it a lot harder for anyone to try and exploit the rewards. I know many PvEers and crafters will not understand where we're coming from, but I hope you can support this petition in whole with the troubles of PvP rewards being included. We would never want this to be inflicted upon you guys if you were enticed to PvP for the best rewards. Additionally, the PvP community is very bothered by the fact we'll get no credit whatsoever for daily and weekly missions for ranked arenas. You're making it to where it's even less of an incentive to participate in ranked arenas. Players who participate in ranked PvP should be getting more rewards and incentives for doing them, not less. And the incentive shouldn't be slashed when participating in them. That being said, our fourth request is that we implore you to adjust the credits given and allow for dailies and weeklies to count for arenas. And this last sentence is where I take most umbrage because I completely disagree with it. Ranked PvP should be disincentivized. Well, I don't want to say it that way. I think ranked PvP needs to be incentivized in its own way. I think ranked comms should be renamed. I've been a champion of that for a while now. They're no longer ranked comms. They are tier 2 comms versus the regular Warzone comms being tier 1 comms. But I think there needs to be a different way to give rewards for ranked PvP. Rating is good, I guess. That's a start. But I feel like beyond rating, there shouldn't really be anything in terms of rewards for ranked Warzones. I mean, maybe credits. I could see giving credits. I can see giving credits on the daily and weekly rewards for sure. I agree that those should be given rewards more comparable to other quests, like daily quests, things like that. So I agree with that, but I really feel like ranked should have its own set of good-looking gear. It should have its own set of titles and stuff like that on its own, and completely separate from regular PvP. You should do ranked once you're done getting your gear and things like that, your statted gear, that is, from the unranked, and then you should move into ranked where you get less rewards, quote-unquote, but more rewarding rewards. And that should be the incentive to do ranked. Otherwise, you just end up with people doing ranked because it's the fastest way to get rank comms, to get your tier 2 comms. And I just think that's a stupid idea. So that's how I would handle ranked PvP. I disagree with the you need to have your ranked PvP comms, your PvP comms, your ranked comms coming from ranked PvP, just because I don't think ranked comms are really ranked comms anymore. They're definitely misnamed, so definitely am an advocate of changing that. And we'll do one more here before I take a break. Rejoining a PvP match. Our fifth request is that he uses implore a lot. He uses implore in all of these. Our fifth request is that we implore you to address the suggestion of rejoining a PvP match after disconnecting. In PvE, players who disconnect being able to get back into a group they were in. This at least should work for ranked PvP matches. Once a team loses a player due to a disconnect in their match, they automatically lose. This is probably one of the biggest gripes the PvP community has. I don't know if that's true, but I guess in your opinion it is, or in Mr. Friend Referral's opinion it is, after the removal of ranked Warzones. So, this, I suspect, is a problem not necessarily in the system itself. I don't think it's an intentional design decision that if you disconnect, you're out. I think it more has to do with the technologicalness, the engine. I suspect it has to do with instances or something like that, where Warzone instances are, if you disconnect, you're out, just like in regular. I don't know if it's possible for them to change that. If they could, I would definitely agree that this would be a good change, but I can't say that this is a design decision, because I don't think it is. I think it's something that it would be nice if they worked on, but if they don't get it in because they can't, that's just the nature of the beast. So I'm going to take a break here. I've been rambling on for far longer than I thought I would on this topic, and I have about half the way to go, so hopefully this may be a longer episode, but hopefully I can get it done in a concise form and don't ramble on too much in the second half. And I'll be back after the break. Alrighty folks, I'm back. I got myself a drink to wet my whistle, and I will continue reading this post. Hopefully you got yourself a drink also. Preferably a Blue Point lager, just like mine. If you live in the New York area, try and find yourself somewhere that sells a Blue Point. Great brewery. Love them. Alright. Topic number 6, I think this is. Friends of SWTOR. Our 6th request is that we implore you to fix any issues with the referral program and try and compensate those who didn't receive the rewards they're entitled to. I was one of the subscribers who utilized this feature and followed every direction on the Friends of SWTOR page, only to never receive the rewards. Some of us who have never received our rewards have also provided proof, such as pictures, our friends' accounts information, etc., to show customer service that we should have gotten our rewards. The program is obviously bugged, but BioWare, we're respectfully requesting that you can look into this, so who've had issues with the program can receive their benefits. There are already 2 major threads surrounding this issue, and I don't think there's much to be said here. If this is true and there is a bug, BioWare should definitely compensate these players. They should get something on top of their bonus for not getting properly compensated in the first place. Maybe a little boost of cartel coins or cartel pack in there for their troubles. Like I said, not much to say there. And here's the big one. I probably said already that this is the biggest thing I disagree with on some other topic, but this here is the #1 thing that I disagree with. Number 7, subscriber benefits. Our 7th request is that we implore you to improve subscriber benefits if possible. Even if discounted, paying with real-life money cartel coins to utilize the collections feature and appearance design shouldn't be the only option. Not every benefit should be handed to us, but I think you'd be doing loyal subscribers a huge favor to utilize creds as well. Maybe have it revolve around subscription payment method too, where subscribers who pay for a 6 months recurring subscription have the best benefits. At the moment, it seems like most of the benefit rewards have been titles. This request can be debated with good points raised on both sides, but surely there's room for improvement. I do agree that there is room for improvement. They could do more things, but here's how it goes. If you are subscribing to the game, BioWare very clearly lays out what you're entitled to. If you do not like it, do not subscribe. If BioWare at any point does anything against what you initially subscribed for or signed up for, I agree you have every right to get some form of compensation and to say whatever you want to BioWare and to their customer service, because they laid out a contract in which you agreed to and they are not fulfilling their end of the bargain. So if there is an inordinate number of maintenances where you can't play the game for a weekend or a week or something like that, you should get some compensation. But other than that, BioWare, anything they do to give you beyond what they have said they will is on them, and you should be grateful for it and do not expect anything more. If you get more, that's great, but if not, you signed up for what was listed on the subscriber page. So if you have a problem with that, just don't subscribe to the game. That's all there is. That's all there is to this. There's nothing beyond that. I know people want more and say they want more, and that's fine. You could always want more, but if you sign up for a subscription, you're getting your subscription. That's it. End of story. Number 8. Class balance and bugs. Warzone arenas are dropping soon when they shouldn't be. The way classes are right now, there are many specs that are just not ready for it. I can guarantee there will be many teams running with 2 Orb Scound healers, or 1 Op Scound healer and 1 tank, and 2 Night Warrior smashers. Class balance updates happen every 5 to 6 months. I don't know if 5 to 6 months is right. I think this is true, this one gap between major changes seems like 5 to 6 months, but I think there have been some changes within that time frame, and that's not necessarily always. And that makes class specs feel like their flavor of the year. Our 8th request is that we implore you to work on more classes and specs if possible. It's really slow at this point overall, and it's possible that the area of development should be expedited with the introduction of arenas and new harder difficulty operations. I don't understand what he means by work on more specs. Does he mean make more specs viable? More classes viable? I guess that's what he means. I don't think he means new specs or things like that, but I think they are working on all their specs and would like to make them all viable, but that's just a hard thing to do. Our ninth request is that we implore you to look into certain class bugs that severely need to be fixed. Night Warrior Elite bug, Sage Sork Force Regen bug. They're detrimental to the player's performance, and it's pretty unacceptable to have the bugs stay unfixed for several weeks plus. When I was playing SWTOR, I played my Guardian and Sentinel less and less due to the annoying Leap bug. It wasn't helpful at all in PvP, and it was plain old annoying. In conclusion, we want severe class bugs and class balancing not to negatively impact difficult PvE instances or arenas. I agree that class balancing should be done in more smaller updates, more frequently, small changes, tweaks here and there. You know, change a 4-stack thing to a 3-stack thing, tweak some ratios, numbers somewhere, but I don't think the best way to go about balance is waiting a long period of time. That being said, I think they've made it clear that the reason they did it this way is because they knew they had arenas in the works and wanted to see how those worked out. I do agree that the Scoundrel is OP right now. Scoundrel healers are just straight up OP in arenas, straight up OP in war zones. They're the best PvP healers, so there needs to be some kind of change there somehow. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's to change the PvP ratios just in PvP and leave PvE, because PvE is actually pretty damn well balanced, and that's the problem with having the same abilities in both. I've discussed this in previous podcasts, so you can go check those out where I discuss PvP balance and what I would do for it. So that's where you can get your more in-depth conversation about that. I agree that fixing some class bugs is a good thing. They should be working on that. And the problem with making more classes and specs viable is that it's hard to have them all do different things and feel unique while simultaneously being different and also being of the same power. You know, small little things can change how certain classes fare and what the best spec is of the best class. And that smallest little thing will be exploited, and that's how you get a flavor of the month or the flavor of the year, as you put it. So I don't really see them being able to do anything about that, but yeah, I could see them working on more classes and more specs. So I agree with this in some respects. Number 8, public test server. Our 10th request, well, I said it's 8 because you put 8 bold points here and multiple requests per bold point, so this is going to be number 8 for me, but 10 for them. Our 10th request is that we implore you to listen to your players in the PTS more often and try to interact more frequently. These testers take hours of their time out of their normal playtime to help test the game for you and provide invaluable feedback so that they can greatly improve an upcoming patch. I don't mean this with any disrespect, but from what I've witnessed, you guys are guilty of ignoring past feedback, like the whole bolster debacle before 2.0 was released, and that really didn't help the PvP community at all. It took you guys several weeks before getting bolster working as intended. Overall, we hope you can improve this area. I can't agree with you more. That is one thing I agree that Bioware has done terribly, is handle their public test server. They need to interact with players more. They need to show that they're working on what we're doing right now, because right now they just feel like demos. They feel like marketing pieces. Look at this upcoming patch, you can play it early. It's like early access, that doesn't count. That's what it feels like to me. It doesn't feel like we're getting anything worked on. I actually discussed this, I tweeted at Amber Green saying that they should release a known issues patch at the end of the PTS when they take it down for good, and then say like, hey, you guys have found this, this, and this, we're working on this, and she said she'd look into it and kick it around the office. So hopefully something like that comes to fruition, because I agree that their public test server the way they handle their public test server is piss poor. Number 9. Ability delay, frames per second, and lag issues. Our 11th request is that we implore you to keep making noticeable improvements to the engine performance, and hopefully note these improvements in future patch notes. Ability delay thread, Google search SWTOR lag. The heavily modified pre-alpha engine must be extremely difficult task to code and improve, but we hope these improvements keep coming because it's annoying how the ability delay resurfaces and the frames per second decrease for certain customers with random patches again and again. I also agree with this completely. They need to continue to work on the ability delay thing. I don't know why it just seems to be going away, coming back, going away, coming back. Different kind of weird bugs that just seem to work like that. They don't exist, they exist, they're back again. The camera bug is one of these also. So things like that I really hope they can fix. I pray that it isn't a problem with the engine that just will never be fixed. But if they continue to work on it, I hope they find something that works all the time and will just have the ability delay bug just be gone forever. And finally, forum interaction. The moderation of these forums has always been pretty strict, and many of us are guilty of resorting to flaming and trolling and the like, but by no means do we visit these boards to purposely flame and troll, etc. From my experience, I've had a pretty rough time with moderation here. I just don't think we're fulfilling the goal of being friendly and welcoming if it's easy to be slapped with a warning or a fraction for those who are more pessimistic of the game, Bioware, EA, etc. As you can see, previous moderation was far stricter. With that being said, our 12th request is that we implore you to do something for those who have sanction opposed against them in the past. Allison and Joveth really made it hard to start any pessimistic topics or discussions, but it feels the same way with the current with the new infraction system in place. Additionally, our 12th request, as it pertains to the forums, I hope interactions with the forums will increase in other areas. As an avid PvPer, it's extremely rare to get a yellow post in the PvP forums. I think most of us who avidly visit the PvP forums can say the PvE forums, Flashpoints, Operations, Heroics, get more responses. But I hope the CMs can see how ignoring other parts of the forums isn't helpful, and we hope that activity is increased around the board. Alright, this is anecdotal, but if that's true, I mean, they should be working even for across the board in the game, but something tells me that that's just this person's opinion and not necessarily fact. Other things in here. Moderation of the forums. The problem with negative and pessimistic forums, or posts, is that a lot of times they get sanctions, not necessarily because they're negative or pessimistic, but because they're just strictly going against the rules of the forums. And it just looks like because they're negative or pessimistic, that's why. And it is easier if you're being negative or pessimistic to go over the line when you're trying to make your point. Sometimes a valid point can be made without having to resort to breaking the actual rules of the forums. And it's really easy to do that. If you're really passionate about something and you're really upset about something, it's easy for you to go above and beyond what is necessary to get your point across. And I think that really sums up this whole forum post debacle with the initial threats to leave and stuff, is that you clearly make good points, but you tarnish them with negativity and don't set yourself up for a good reaction. You set yourself up to be criticized by those who actually like the game, because it feels like you're not really giving suggestions or posting your opinions, even though you are. It just feels like an attack on the game. And that's the problem, I feel, is that when you start your posts very negatively with a "we're gonna quit," it sounds like you're making threats, and that's just immediately sparks a certain nerve that's like, this person is being hostile to me or whoever supports the game, so I'm going to bring hostility back. And that's, anytime I see a thread that starts like that starts with some kind of, you know, stereotypically negative tagline, it just breeds contempt. And I think in SWTOR specifically, because throughout the internet there is so much negativity towards the game, negativity that just doesn't make sense when they see it within a player. Even if the player is making valid points, they just act defensively to it because that's how they've been programmed to do it. I don't think necessarily Mr. Jergens or Friend Referrals or whoever's post, I don't think he necessarily means to be hostile, because I feel like he actually likes the game and enjoys playing the game and is trying to make good points, but by bringing them up so hostilely and so negatively, that's what the problem is with this whole forum post thing. So I'm glad that he made the post, I'm glad that he made his feelings known, and I'm glad that he actually rewrote the post, because initially it was far more hostile than this second post, which I think is actually a pretty good one. I'm definitely going to link to it. I mean, if you want to read it yourself, if you want to vote in the polls that he has posted, go right ahead. Overall, I think this was a good post. I think it was a good talking points. It's definitely made for a very long episode. Hope you've enjoyed this discussion. And with that, we'll move on to the Wall of Crazy.
What? That's impossible even for a computer.
It's not impossible. I used to bullseye womp rats in my T16 back home. They're not much bigger than 2 meters.
And this week's Wall of Crazy topic comes from @Mia828 on Twitter. He suggests that for living legends, aka players who have reached legacy level 50, you should be able to get permanent double XP. That's an awesome idea. Players who have reached legacy level 50, obviously very dedicated players, they probably have multiple ults, lots of ults, play all the time, and giving them permanent double XP I think is a very cool idea. I like that. It's a good way to make legacy level 50 matter. I think legacy level 50 should matter more, especially if they ever want to add more legacy levels, which at some point they probably will. I know they have studies that say less than 1% or 2% of players actually have legacy level 50, but for those 1 or 2% of players, that's an insane incentive to play the game, and it also gives other players incentive to reach that level so that they can get the double XP. And third end, it's a bonus that they don't necessarily have to have. It's not a game-breaking bonus. It's not a bonus that all players need to play the game. You can have your regular double XP weekends. I think we'll have one coming up at the end of November. If I had to guess, around Thanksgiving time, we'll get another double XP weekend, maybe a couple of them into Christmas. Thanksgiving, Christmas wrapped up into one, because how late Thanksgiving is this year. And I think that's a great idea. So thank you @Mia828. And I think that about does it for today's episode. Like I discussed last week, I will be playing video games for 25 hours November 2nd, starting at 8 a.m., going throughout the night into the morning on the next day. I will be playing 25 hours of Star Wars related games, SWTOR, KOTOR, Rogue Squadron, any other game you can think of. I'll be playing it for 25 hours for charity. If you'd like to make a donation, I've provided a link in the show notes, please. Anything you can give for the children's hospitals is just great. $1, if everyone gives $1 who listens to this, that's a lot of money that they've raised already. So I'm in the Tenacious Jawas group through the SWTOR subreddit. A SWTOR player set that up, so thank you, a SWTOR player. And please feel free to donate. Anything you can spare is just great. Next week, as I said, I will be talking about patch 2.4, so please send me your emails, your reactions, your first impressions of patch 2.4, any talking points that you want to get out there. I'll read your emails on the show, and as usual, if you'd like to call in, you have a cell phone, you have some recording device, a mic. If you're playing an MMO, you probably have a mic. Just record your call in, and you can hear your voice in the show, asking me a question or making a point, making a counterpoint to maybe something I've said this episode or something about patch 2.4. I'd love to hear it. As always, if you'd like to contact me or send me your listener call-ins or emails, you can send your questions, comments, and concerns to gadokteeg.crr@gmail.com, or you can tweet any 150 character musings to @gteeg on Twitter. That's GTEEG on Twitter. If you're new to the game or thinking of resubscribing, I've provided my Refer Friend link in the show notes, so if you'd like a little added incentive to come back, feel free to use it. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Unnamed SWTOR podcast. This is JD, signing off.